Earlier last year, I shared with you all some tips on how to ride as an extra tall cyclist, and it was really great to hear some of the responses to the video. Since then, I've decided to do a follow-up, and I thought, who better to join me than the hugely successful ex-pro Magnus Bäckstedt. At 6'4", Magnus was one of the sport's tallest riders, known for his sheer power and strength, which won him races like Paris-Roubaix and a stage at the Tour de France. I've decided to catch up with Magnus to find out if he's got any tips to share with us tall folk, which maybe improve our cycling. Now, don't worry if you're not tall like myself and Magnus, good on you, but you can still watch this video and get a lot from it because Magnus has plenty of stories to tell. Now, better get away from these dizzying heights, find Magnus. Magnus, finally, I've got a bit of draft to ride behind today. Bit of shelter.
How you doing, man?
Nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
Great to have you. So before we get started, I think there's a few questions we need to run through for the record. So how tall actually are you?
6'4" or 193 tall.
6'4", so we're on the higher end of the scale, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
And you were known for being a really tall rider in your career too.
Yeah, but more so probably the heavier rider. You know, there's always been a couple of riders who've been taller than me, but I don't think there's ever been anyone heavier than me on a bike.
So how heavy were you when you were racing? What was your weight?
My sort of match weight was 95 to 96 kilo. I won Roubaix at 96.
Really?
Usually started the Grand Tours at about 95.
Okay, wow. And you were talking through some of your power numbers a little earlier with me, so they're pretty impressive. So for a sprint, what can you do for a sprint?
So my peak effect, the best ever, was 2025.
2025 watts, that is mad. And your 20-minute power, I think, is even more impressive.
Yeah, 540 I used to knock out for 20 minutes, but then that's what was required to move, you know, at the speed that everyone else did. And
okay, and I'm sorry for asking this question because I get asked it a lot too, but I'm going to ask you, I want to know what your answer is.
Hit me with it.
Do you think your height was an advantage during your career?
I think at the odd point it has been, largely when you're stuck sort of down the middle of the bunch and you're trying to see what's happening up front. That's the only point I can really think that my height has been an advantage. Otherwise it's aerodynamic drag, added weight, all the rest of it. So.
I was a bit of a scaredy cat, and when I was looking down the bunch, I was seeing all the pinch points that were coming up and the obstacles, and I was going, oh no, I don't want to know.
I looked at them as you know, it was an advantage for me because I could see them before everyone else, so I could actually make a move for it. So
yeah, it's a good point.
You got to use it to your advantage if you're stuck with it, like we are.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I did say we're going for a ride, so should we get going?
Yeah.
Thanks, Magnus. Okay, Magnus, towards the end of my career, I kind of started to really enjoy descents actually. I felt I kind of got a bit more used to them through more experience in the pro peloton and began to enjoy them. I think for a tall person with a bit of extra weight, once you get on a fast flowy descent, you can use it to your advantage. But what was your own experience when you were racing?
Yeah, I mean, I actually grew up as a downhill skier when I lived up in Sweden, so I came from a love of speed already when I got onto a bike, you know. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. You can really make a use of the height and the weight to give you that bit of extra speed. But I think a lot of descending is actually coming from the confidence in your bike and the confidence in the setup of your bike to just allow you to handle it in the best way.
Yeah. And how do you feel about disc brakes now? Because personally, I loved them when I was racing. I felt it gave me a lot more control, especially in the wet, which I didn't really have before on rim brakes.
Well, I agree with the stopping power on a disc brake is far superior to a rim brake. I'm still struggling to get that control. I've ridden them for quite a few years now, and I can see that they're definitely better in most ways, I should say. But it's just me getting used to braking, you know, in the way that I used to with a rim brake. So I think they're here to stay, and see what happens with it.
Yeah. I'm also interested to hear whether you were kind of like, when I was the bottle carrier quite a lot, so I used to love getting bottles at the top of descents and then just bombing down through the convoy with an extra 10 kilos. Was that something that happened with your career?
Yeah, definitely. And if you timed it well, you got to the bottom right at the front of the peloton and then you drift back and give them that. But
climbs, probably weren't our forte, were they, Magnus? How did you get on when the road turned uphill?
I was never good at it in terms of racing. I always enjoyed them, but yeah, like I said, as soon as you got the smaller, lighter riders there, it's a lost battle really. So it's just a damage limitation, let's call it that one.
And do you have any advice for people, tall riders, people on the heavier end of the scale, looking to survive the climbs?
Make sure that you find your rhythm, and especially with your cadence, make sure that you don't, not everyone has got the lung and heart capacity to ride at 95 to 100 RPM going uphill. And I think there's too many people saying that you've got to spin up, spin up, spin up. If that doesn't work for you, then don't do it. For me, for instance, if I'm climbing and I'm above 75 RPM, it feels like I'm spinning out. So I gotta go by brute power to make that happen.
Again, of course, climbs come in many different sizes, shapes and gradients. And Magnus, you did win a stage in the Tour de France, so you can't be too bad on the climbs. Was there any...
I managed to get through them, didn't I?
Yeah. Did you ever use kind of a lower, less aggressive gradients to your advantage with all that power?
Anything up to about 3% I used to be okay at. And then as long as they were short and steep, so I could use the explosive sort of minute to 2 minute power, then I tend to last quite a long time.
Yeah.
But even races like Flanders, and that was probably out of my reach for the top, from real pointy end of the race.
Yeah, okay. And I'm interested to know how you coped. Flanders is a good example, kind of sprinting out of all those corners, because for me, that was something I actually struggled with, to be honest, especially if I was far back in the bunch. All those sprints really took it out of me.
Well, see, sprinting for me was something that I was naturally good at. I could always hit big numbers, at any given point in a race. So that sort of quick acceleration out of a turn, I don't think really that put me under too much pressure. So I guess I was quite lucky in that way that, as a taller, heavier rider, I had my sprint to sort of lean on a little bit.
Yeah, and when you were sprinting, so you were coming towards the finish, were you trying to keep the pace high and go from kind of a higher speed, roll into a sprint? Yeah,
always.
Yeah, I was the same.
The moment the speed dropped, I knew I was going to struggle to beat the smaller, lighter rider in that. So I'd always want to try and sort of force the speed to be, ideally, if it was about 45 kilometers an hour, then I knew I could get everything moving quickly enough to challenge for that, as long as I left myself enough room, and for me a longer sprint was always better. Okay,
and do you have any specific advice for taller folk looking to get the most out of their sprint? Any kind of positions or?
You've obviously got to look at the aerodynamic position as much as you do when you're riding your bike on any other sort of occasion. But sprinting is like most things. If you don't practice it, you're not going to get good at it. So just keep trying, keep practicing, keep making sure that you try different gear selections and different scenarios to give yourself that sort of spectra to play with.
Okay, Magnus, I'm interested to hear what bike size and kind of position you went for, because I was 2 meters 4, 6 foot 8.
Yeah.
It was always kind of a bone of contention for me how to get on my bike and get the right size and everything to do with that. So
it's always difficult to try and squash you onto a bike when as soon as you go over 6'2", 6'3", it becomes really tricky. So my favorite bikes are actually when I rode aluminium, because we could get a specific measure to me. So I always rode really long top tube, so a 61 centimeter top tube, and then 14 centimeter stem with a 95 mil reach handlebar. Which got me into a good position. But obviously since then it's things have changed. We're running carbon, and it becomes more and more difficult to find the right position on a bike. So what I'm riding now, I'm really happy with. It fits me quite well. So
Yeah, because obviously in my career I was always on carbon framed bikes, so I was often running a 15 centimetre stem.
Yeah.
So I'd have loved to have had a 9.5 centimetre stem on the front. But you were talking to me as well about kind of the wheels you used during your career and how often they'd last for.
Yeah, I mean, I went through rear wheels like there was no tomorrow.
Really?
It didn't really matter what we put underneath me. They lasted a couple of months at best.
Wow.
But it was just one of those things, heavy rider, big peak numbers of power, and obviously the way I raced my bike wasn't particularly nice to the material, let's put it that way.
So did you have a bit of a reputation with the team mechanics?
Yeah, definitely.
I bet they loved you.
Definitely. Everyone else had one spare wheel and I had 5, you know, in the truck. That was
That's Magnus's corner of the team bus.
Yeah.
Okay, right, Magnus, I think you're going to feel my pain here because
right.
I always struggled for shelter when I was racing, and I'd often get in the breakaway or in a small group with riders who are a bit smaller than me, and I'd be trying to kind of cower behind them, saving as much energy as I could, but it was quite difficult. So what was it like for you when you were racing? How did you manage to get shelter in the bunch?
To be honest with you, I don't think it really crossed my mind an awful lot, because you just got so used to it that was the way it was. But for one reason or another, I've always been really slippery in the wind tunnel and always managed to pick up whatever little draft is available for me, unless it's, you know, some really small dude. But most of the time I was quite happy in the breakaways or whatever. It's just tucked down, and really you had to fine tune your senses as to where that tiny little bit of shelter was and use whatever you could. Yeah. So, but most of the time, if they were that small, I tend to hurt them a lot more with the power that I was putting out. So
just put them into the gutter.
So it didn't really matter what. They got more slipstream on me, obviously, but I still managed to hurt them a fair bit.
Yeah,
it was just always nice.
Okay, next up, Magnus, we'll get a little bit technical. So, tyre pressure. Did you have a kind of preferred tyre pressure? Say, forget the cobbles, because I know you absolutely love the cobbles, but just a normal race, tarmac roads.
So, when I was racing, basically the standard was 8 bar or 120 psi in the tyres. And no one even asked a question whether it was wet or dry. It was just what you went with. Since then, obviously, I'm riding around on 27mm tyres on this bike now.
Yeah.
I never really go above 95 psi.
Okay.
I think
I'm the same. I think it's way more comfortable.
Yeah, it is more comfortable. It gives you more grip, because at the end of the day, you've got to deform the tyre underneath you for it to generate grip. That's one of the big differences, I think, is the fact that we're now allowing ourselves to ride lower pressure and realizing that it's not slowing you down, it's actually making the bike more rideable and you're faster around corners, etc.
And Magnus, did you ever kind of limit your portions or what you're eating, or kind of try and diet to lose weight, get down to race weight?
I mean, we were playing around with various different ways to get me to be lighter, but it never really worked. Like, I obviously got lighter, but I lost so much of the top end power once I got past a certain number. And for me, if I lost my lead out and my sprint, that was what made me who I was on the bike. So there was no point in me trying to climb one group better up a great big mountain when I couldn't sprint the following day. Because, you know, what was I there for? I was just a number in the bunch then. Yeah,
so if you're a tall rider, E for power.
Power.
Yeah. Good piece of advice. Get the porridge into you.
Yeah.
Okay, Magnus, thanks so much for joining us today.
Anytime.
One last quick question.
Yeah.
What would you have been if you weren't a cyclist? I get asked this so many times. People always say I should have played basketball or something.
I would have been a downhill skier.
Downhill skier?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. I grew up doing that. I still love doing it. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I'm not sure I'd have been a downhill skier. I don't think I'd have been that great at it. I think I get too scared too easily. But Magnus, it was a real honour for you to join us today. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And I really do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you have any more questions for myself or Magnus, please put them in the comment section down below and we'll do our best to get back to you. Thanks everyone. We're going to go off for a quick spin now.
Yeah. I think so. And a cup of coffee as well.
Yeah. Go downhill fast too.
Yeah.
Thanks,